All right, so in this video I'll be dealing with Matthew 24 again, and it was actually specifically asked by somebody that subscribed to my channel, and they had brought up an argument that dispensationalists will use often about Matthew 24. I believe it's verse 15. In fact, let me turn there so I can read it. Matthew 24, verse 13, and it talks about, but the one who endures to the end, he will be saved. And they say, well, you have to endure your whole life, endure to the end, and you'll be saved. Now, a true Christian will endure to the end, but this is not what the context is teaching. So, but what they say is you have to do things. In other words, it pretty much becomes a work salvation. But the dispensationalists will put it way out into the future, saying, well, this is talking about the Jews in the tribulation period, and which I don't believe there's a future tribulation. I'm not worried about that. The Bible doesn't teach that. But they say after the secret rapture, which doesn't exist in the Bible either, they'll say that that's for the Jews in the tribulation period, that they have to endure to the end. In other words, not take the mark of the beast. And they'll say it's a faith and works salvation. And in fact, Peter Ruckman will say in Matthew 24 that is talking about the Jews in the tribulation period, and that they're under the old covenant all over again. Well, in Hebrews chapter 10, it says that the Old Testament sacrifices, the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, was completely done away with, is abolished by the final sacrifice of Jesus Christ. So what does this text mean? It's talking to the people of that day once again. And it goes on to say, but the one who endures to the end, he will be saved. The gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world, that's the known world of that time, which was the Roman Empire, as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Now, we've talked about that in another video, earlier video, that the abomination of desolation is when you see the armies surrounding Jerusalem, escape, and the Christians did escape. And verse 16, then those who are in Judea must flee the mountains. Does it say those in Nebraska flee? That's where I'm at, is in Nebraska right now. Or those in Albuquerque flee. Or those in America flee. No, it says those in Judea flee to the mountains. And then it goes on to say, whoever's on the housetop must not go down to get the things that out of that, to get the things out that are in his house. Sorry, I'm used to King James still, trying to get used to the NASB, but absolutely love this translation. It goes on to say in verse 18, whoever is in the field must not turn back to get his cloak. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. And there's a big reason why he says that. If you see him when he's about to be crucified, he says, don't cry for me. Don't weep for me, but weep for you and your children, because of the judgment that was going to come on Jerusalem. Verse 20, but pray that your flight will not be in the winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation, such has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will. Now, some people would stop me right here, and I'll go ahead and cover it. Just real simple, and I'll get more in depth in another video. They'll say, well, look, what about the Holocaust? That was worse than this, wasn't it? Oh, no. It wasn't the magnitude of the tribulation that it's talking about. It was how intense the suffering was. And if you look at Josephus and his writings, or any historians, what the Jews went through in 70 AD while Jerusalem was being destroyed, women eating their own young, boiling them, and eating them and feeding other people, and being starved, and then the Romans wouldn't let them die, so just give them enough to live, so they had to keep on suffering. They went through more tragedy and suffering, and more intense suffering, than people did in the Holocaust. And I'll get into that in another video, but just to put that there has never been, for just one type of people, which would be the Jews in Jerusalem, and what they went through, there has nothing been like that since Jesus was right, since the beginning of the world until it never will be. And I'll get into the tragedy that happened and how severe the judgment of God when it came down, how severe it was upon Jerusalem. And I think that'll be a really interesting study. Verse 22, unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. So you see that there's the verse 22. So if you take verse 22 with verse 13 says, but the one who endures to the end, he will be saved. And then it goes on to say in verse 22, unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be cut short. So no life would have been saved if he didn't cut those days short. And of course, people were saved out of it. They saw the army surrounding Jerusalem, and there was a little bit of a battle, and the Romans took off. Nobody knows why. I covered that in the last video. And the Christians fled because they realized what Jesus Christ said was true. In fact, in the early church, that was an apologetic used in the defense of the gospel and the defense of Jesus Christ being the Messiah was Matthew 24 and his prophecy of what was going to happen in 70 AD. And that's when the Great Tribulation happened. If you want to put a tribulation anywhere, it was right there. It was very great tribulation when Jerusalem was trampled underfoot by the nations or the Gentiles. So I hope that helps somebody. It's talking about physical salvation. If they were to endure all that, they would live. And the only way you could get through that was either to escape, and I'm sure there were some people that actually sat there and endured to the end, even in Jerusalem, and we'll get into that in another video. Until next time, good day, and God bless.